So the first poem I want to, or piece of work that we looked at this year that I want to compare to a modern work is the courtly love poem, The Apple, and I want to compare it to kind of multiple films really, but the idea of the love between the Joker and Harley Quinn and the chaos behind it. Just looking at the wording of this poem, courtly love poems at the time were kind of like knightly love, where it's kind of made up and perfect in a way, whereas the Joker's is kind of made up also, and they kind of perceive it as perfect, but it's never actually perfect. But their idea of perfect is chaos. So just looking at the wording of the poem, I'm looking at the second line, and it says, "You've enslaved me brutally in your prison." I really like this line because comparing it to the Joker and Harley Quinn, the Joker at times kind of does put Harley Quinn in chaotic situations where they're kind of playing tricks on one another, and that's how they're showing their love. And continuing in the poem, they really are enslaved by each other's love in multiple films. In the most recent one, Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey, they actually kind of break up. But continuing off that, they are like so enamored by one another. And in the poem, it says, "I have found no likeness to your beauty." And I think that's really the story of why the Joker keeps chasing her and why she kind of constantly falls back into the Joker's arms. And continuing the story, the poem, I'm looking at the last line, and I really like the comparison for this one because it says, "Like the hue which is seen on the color of on your cheeks," and I think this is like the idea of blushing and how that's a physical show of affection to someone or a reaction. And I really like that because the Joker and Harley Quinn both wear all this makeup and this show of like happiness. And also, when they fall in love with one another, they get tattoos of Harley Quinn or Quinn, and she wears the Joker's necklace. So, in comparing the two, I did find similarities. Obviously, they're completely different pieces of work, but I did find similarities between the Apple and the films that are featured, the Joker and Harley Quinn, which the Joker, Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey, a lot of the Batmans, and all of the Batman comics type deal. And continuing on from that, I wanted to compare another piece of work, which was actually Boat of Cyprus. And I want to make kind of an out there comparison, but I compared it to Westworld. And in Westworld, it's the idea of AI and robots basically gaining consciousness along their story and like kind of questioning what's around them. And as I looked at the Boats of Cyprus poem, you kind of see the questions that they ask about the world, where it's kind of like a continuation where the questions become more and more complicated, but it's also like a gaining of knowledge within that. So just in the last stanza, I'm looking, "Oh sun and oh moon, why do you grow dim in turn?" I really like this because it's kind of a question of consciousness, in my opinion. And connecting this to Westworld, Dolores is the main character, and she goes through, basically gets killed over and over again, and gains AI consciousness to become a human, basically. It's very complicated, but it's a good story. And she kind of starts to begin to ask more complicated questions, and as this story goes on, it's kind of like she's, or whoever the narrator is becoming more and more aware of their situation, yet like kind of anxious within it, which is kind of what she does because as she becomes more and more human and aware what's going on in her situation, she becomes like restless. And similarly, it's mentioned that the narrator becomes restless in this story. Um, so yeah, thank you for the great year. It's been wonderful. I'm graduating next semester, so I'm pretty excited to get out there. I'd just like to thank you. And thank you for some exceptions for extended work. That was really, really needed at times. And thank you. Have a great holiday season. War Eagle.